Hey everyone, I'm Abby Sharp. Welcome to Abby's Kitchen. As I'm sure you have probably seen through just the bombardment of recent social media ads, some of which I think have unfortunately ended up on my YouTube channel, which is super frustrating, so I am sorry about that. But there is a newly repopularized weight loss app on the scene called Noom. Now, I say repopularized because the app has actually been on the market since 2012, but only recently has it been really gaining momentum and popularity. Probably thanks to the massive marketing campaign. But anyways, Noom claims to fill the gaps of so many other quick fix diets, offering long-term weight loss results through motivation and guidance to make a true lifestyle change. They actually position themselves as an anti-diet wellness program and not a traditional weight loss diet. Sneaky language that is super problematic for lots of reasons that we're going to be discussing in more detail later on. But since Noom's app also makes reference to several studies that seem to support their claims for sustainable weight loss, a lot of you have asked me to weigh in. Now, of course, before we get started, just my general disclaimer that the information in this video is for education and entertainment purposes only, and you should always speak to a healthcare professional about your unique diet needs. Also, this video is not in any way meant to shame anyone for choosing to use this app. This is just my professional review of the platform, its supportive literature, and some of the potential pros and cons. For now, let's start at the beginning. So upon downloading the app and setting up the account, the first thing it asks you is, how much weight do you want to lose? I guess this isn't all that surprising considering that this app's main purpose, of course, is to assist in weight loss. Now, moving along, the second prompt poses a very concerning sliding scale where you get to pick which animal represents the weight loss speed you want to move at. Your choices are either the turtle, rabbit, or the cheetah. And in case this needs to be said, I just want to start off with the very simple fact that we are humans, not animals. And obviously, we actually cannot simply choose or will ourselves to lose weight at a particular speed, if we can even will ourselves to lose weight at all. But we're going to get more into that in a minute. Now, with that being said, there are aspects of the Noom platform that have proven helpful for some users. So let's start by going through what the Noom app actually provides its users. We're also going to be covering some of the pros, cons, and I'm going to speak to a fellow dietitian colleague of mine who used to actually work for Noom, but left, of course, due to her own concerns. So it's going to be very interesting to get the inside scoop. So definitely wait around for that. So first big question, what does the Noom app provide its users? So the Noom weight loss app offers a personalized health plan from an online health coach, as well as 24/7 support and motivation from the coach. Now, like similar apps, it encourages you to log your meals and your exercise. But unlike other apps, each day when you open Noom, you're met with a fresh platform filled with new articles and quizzes designed to kind of test your knowledge on all things like portion control, calorie budgeting, eating less calorically dense foods, ways to hack your sweet tooth, breaking up with bad habits, and Noom's color system, aka basically a traffic light system for food, which is eerily similar to the terrible WW Kurbo app that I took down right here. But more on that later. Anyway, the app claims that by reading these daily articles, also completing the quizzes, and by following the recommendations of your personalized coach, Noom will help you create behavior changes for sustainable long-term weight loss. This is actually kind of the whole selling point of Noom. It's behavior change over restriction, which in theory is actually a really great plan since the research does suggest that restricting calories through dieting often does do more harm than good in the long run for a lot of people. and that by focusing on behavior rather than the end goal of just weight loss can actually be really helpful. But is Noom actually fully on board with that? I am guessing not. As mentioned before, Noom positions themselves as a wellness program and as anti-diet, which means that they're directly targeting a certain population who is interested in kind of getting away from traditional diet culture. Yet, of course, when you sign up, you're allowed to choose from two different options. Either I want to get fit for good, or I want to lose weight for good. Notice that we don't see options like I want to get healthy for good, or I want to increase healthy behaviors for good. But anyway, while the options in themselves are already problematic, I am seriously confused by these supposedly personalized options because regardless of which one you click on, you're guided through the exact same set of questions with prompts about weight loss. Apparently, Noom views getting fit as a synonym for just losing weight. Yeah, no. Anyway, after just a short time navigating the app, I started seeing a lot of mixed messages. For example, 1 minute you may be quizzed on the hypothetical scenario of having 100 calories left in your caloric budget, and you're forced to choose which item would help you feel most satisfied. While the Big Mac at 563 calories would potentially leave you more satisfied if you were actually really hungry, the perfect 100-calorie portion of a half a fresh mango was apparently the right answer. Surprise, surprise. Meanwhile, we see the seemingly supportive, non-judgmental, and non-diety heads up that it's unrealistic to eat healthy foods all the time, so instead they recommend a specific breakdown for low-calorie, moderate-calorie, and high-calorie foods to enjoy. Spoiler alert, dichotomizing foods like this and giving very specific percentages of how much you can enjoy is just another diet rule that you need to follow. So why is Noom supposed to even work? Well, Noom is supposed to work better than other diets, largely because of the 24/7 online coaching that it offers. The idea behind this is that there is immediate feedback and validation for following through with entering your meals and completing the readings and quizzes. However, through reading different users' reviews on their experience with the app, it kind of seems as if the jury is still out whether or not these kind of health coaches are actually real humans or just kind of bots posing as humans. In other words, this may or may not be 2020's diet culture world of Westworld. Just saying. Some users did report that they were left without responses from their coaches, or that the responses and the messages seemed automated and kind of not really personalized for them. I'm definitely going to be asking my colleague Caroline later on in the video for a little bit more insight into this whole theory that these are not real people. But assuming that these are real humans, which I assume that they are, it still can't be a really great feeling when you're paying into something, $59 a month to be exact, with the understanding that there will be another person there for you at all times to offer sound and sensible nutrition and diet advice. So what are the suggested foods to eat and avoid while you're following the Noom app? Well, as previously alluded, Noom uses a traffic light system to categorize food, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. Red foods are the most calorie dense and should be eaten less frequently and in smaller portions. Yellow foods have more calories and or less healthy nutrients per serving than green foods and should be incorporated into your diet in moderate portions. And lastly, green foods are the least calorie dense and should make up the bulk of your diet. Unsurprisingly, green foods include things like vegetables, most fruits, and whole grains. Yellow foods include things like lean meats, legumes, and low-fat dairy products. And then there's red foods, which include red meats and desserts, as well as things like full-fat dairy products, nuts, seeds, and their butter and oils. Essentially, this system depends pretty solely on caloric density to classify foods into their respective colors, which can be problematic if taken out of context. While I agree fully that some foods are more nutritionally dense than others, and that balance is so important for overall health, classifying foods solely on caloric density seems to be bringing us back to the fat-phobic 90s. No thanks. Now, the app does specify that no foods are off limits and that the light system is just there to kind of help with recognizing which foods are more or less calorically dense. However, it doesn't take much of a stretch of the imagination to recognize that people could very easily begin to try to avoid the red foods, as they can be linked to bad or unhealthy options. In fact, when logging your red foods, if you go over at all, you're met with this scary red warning sign to limit your portions. Conversely, you are seemingly praised both by the app platform and by online coaches when you're eating mostly green foods. In my mind, there is a huge risk that people will develop an intense fear of all of these types of red foods while filling their plate with excessive amounts of low-calorie green foods like vegetables and fruits. This to me is feeling like a how-to guide for orthorexia. So while Noom steps forward from other diets and other weight loss apps with the premise that no foods are off limits, I am left wondering if that is really the case. If so, and people do find themselves feeling motivated and not triggered by the premise of these kind of strict categories, then yeah, I think Noom could potentially be a good educational tool for understanding the caloric density of different types of foods. But that is really about it. We're going to talk a lot more about that momentarily. But first, the big question that you all have, is Noom actually a good tool for weight loss? So there are actually some studies reviewing Noom which support the claims that using the app faithfully does result in weight loss. One study published back in 2016 reviewed all of the data input into the app and compared baseline weights with end weights for those users that consistently recorded their meals, exercise, and weigh-ins for 6 months. In other words, these were the hardcore successful users. Interestingly, there were over 10 million people who had downloaded the app at this time, but only 0.36% or 36,000 actually used it consistently. I mean, I guess I would quit too if it wasn't working for me. But anyways, let's look at the stats. What they found were, of this 0.36% of users, the hardcore users, 31% of users reported less than a 5% decrease in body weight, around 24% lost 10% of their body weight, and 22% lost more than 20% of their weight. That is pretty significant if the weight were to be kept off. Now at follow-up, at just a year after starting the program, they only had data on half of the participants and found that just 14% were able to maintain at least 10% body weight loss. Now interestingly, this study is constantly cited without the follow-up data, saying that 77% of app users lose weight using the app, which sounds pretty good. What sounds not so appealing is the reality that 99% of users don't stick to the app for more than 6 months. So yeah, I see why they sell it like they do. The truth is, even if the weight maintenance results were really fantastic at 1 year, 1 year is not even enough time to make the claim that the app helps you lose weight and keep the weight off for life. We would want to see a follow-up at 2.5 years, at 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road to see how these users are doing. Also, it's important to note that this is really all self-reported data. And when you're being scrutinized by a seemingly real human on the other end of the app, I don't know, wouldn't you be kind of tempted and motivated to fudge the numbers just a little bit too? Now, another study that Noom references in support of their app was done on a much smaller scale. The study took place with 43 overweight participants with prediabetes who were within one office setting. Though by the end of the study, only 36 participants kind of follow through with the consistent reporting of the app. Again, not great. While the sample was admittedly small, they did find that 64% of the users who completed the app's online coaching and committed to the consistent use of the app and coaching lost over 5% of their body weight. Now, the issue with this study was that it was done with a very specific and very small population. And each of these people were actually assigned a Virtual Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recognized master's level coach. I know that was a mouthful, but in other words, translating the findings of the study to the general population may not be so realistic. This is because the average user will not be paired up with a specialized master's coach, and they likely will not have the unique motivation of being diagnosed with prediabetes prior to using the app. Also, again, the user's weight loss was only reported in the study. There was no follow-up here to verify if this weight was kept off in the long term. Now, what both of these studies found was that when users were actually more actively engaged in the app, inputting their meals and exercise regularly, weight loss was obviously more likely and more successful. But we really don't know what the long-term impact is. Suspiciously, both of these studies were published in 2016. That's 4 years ago, and yet they're still the two that Noom references most often. If Noom claims to offer long-term sustainable weight loss, then shouldn't there be updated research years down the road to prove these participants kept their weight off in the long run? There should, but there isn't, because this long-term data doesn't exist. And if it did, it probably wouldn't be that flattering to their brand. It would not be surprising for the majority of participants to regain their weight after the diet, as weight loss interventions typically do result in early weight loss, followed by a bit of a plateau and then progressive regain. It is also known that after periods of dieting, our bodies undergo physiological changes, including alterations in our hunger and satiety hormones, as well as our metabolic rate, all of which aim to kind of push our bodies back to our initial pre-diet weight. As much as many people want to believe that, this is their body failing them or that they failed the diet, that simply is not the case. We've talked already on this channel a lot about our body's natural set point range, aka basically where our bodies are most comfortable, weight and shape-wise. So even if that number lands you maybe higher on the scale than you may want, just based on what society deems to be desirable, it's largely because your body's genetically programmed to know where it's functioning best. I am not saying that permanent weight loss is not possible. I'm also not saying that weight loss will not possess some health benefits for some people. But I am saying that in a lot of cases, purposeful manipulation of your body through restriction can often backfire. And that if you do lose weight on a diet just to gain it back, there is strong evidence that this is not your fault. Okay, so now let's get into some of the potential benefits of using this app. All criticism aside, there are some top-level elements of the app that I think may be potentially useful. So number one is encouraging SMART goals. If you're not familiar with this popular acronym, SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So research has shown that goals set without a SMART framework are less likely to be attained. I like that the app makes use of the framework and also encourages the setting of SMART goals, even if in practice, sometimes I would say that the app itself doesn't exactly walk the talk. I will talk more about this later, but it does, for example, allow you to make outrageous goals like losing 100 pounds in a few months without flagging that, hey, no, that is not exactly SMART. So I'm not quite sure that the app itself has completely bought into the SMART thing. Number two is that it considers eating psychology. Unlike most diets, this app also discusses some common aspects of psychology as it relates to food, such as untangling common cognitive distortions. Some of these unhealthy thinking patterns include all or nothing thinking, mind reading, exaggerated thinking, etc. So all or nothing thinking refers to our tendency to think of certain situations in extreme black or white categories, aka I have to eat perfectly all week, or if I have one donut, I might as well eat 12. You probably know it well. So addressing these types of unhealthy thinking patterns can be hugely beneficial for our overall health and well-being. However, the mention of these cognitive distortions does seem like more of tokenism than any kind of real tool to help people begin to understand and alter their actual thought patterns. Essentially, instead of diving deep enough into these thought processes to make any kind of real difference, they kind of just scratch the surface with basic definitions and maybe some basic examples of how they may play out in your diet journey. Like, cool, yeah, I mean, all or nothing is definitely a big problem, but what the F do I do about it now? Now, number 3 is the focus on self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is the belief in our own ability to succeed, and this seems to be a pretty important part of the app's success. Research suggests that developing a strong sense of self-efficacy can be highly predictive of behavior change and motivation. So because of this, if the app really were to help its users foster a stronger sense of self-efficacy, successful behavior change would be more likely. However, their take on self-efficacy seems to be more of a requirement of success for the app rather than an actual tool to develop it. Placing the success of one's weight loss journey solely on their own self-efficacy is also a bit concerning, as it really is setting them up for internalized judgment if or when the diet fails them. So while I do believe that the above aspects of the app could be strengths and benefits for its use, I do want to just flag that the mechanism for their use does not seem to be focused on the user's growth in their healthy relationship with food or with themselves. Rather, again, it all plays into the overarching goal of weight loss, which may not always actually be a healthy use of these tools. So on the flip side, what are some of the downsides of this app? Well, first of all, it is still a diet. I know they call themselves anti-diet, but at the end of the day, this app is still promoting diet culture and weight loss through restricting bad, aka red foods, and ultimately cutting calories. There just isn't any way that this app can be used without implementing food rules and restrictive behaviors. One concerning way that they do this is through food categories, aka the traffic light system, and by food or calorie budgeting that they encourage. As we know, restricting calories through dieting simply isn't as cut and dry as it may sound. Our bodies do adapt to these diets by compensating for the calorie loss with changes in metabolism and hormone production, and they can also potentially trigger orthorexic tendencies as well. Again, I am not saying that all weight loss endeavors cause eating disorders. Absolutely not. But there is no way that we can pretend that this dichotomizing of food into finite categories that you're encouraged to restrict or budget for is not just another diet. Number 2, calories inform the diet recommendations. As alluded to previously, dichotomizing foods according to their caloric density through the use of Noom's traffic light system is also a huge concern. This is because it pretty much is solely using the calories that the food provides to categorize them as good or bad to eat or avoid. This largely overlooks the most important nutritional aspects of our foods, the micro and macronutrients that they provide to give us energy and to keep us functioning our best throughout the day. So here's an example. Noom categorizes almonds as a red food, simply because they're higher in calories compared to fruits and vegetables. That is true. However, this is not a bad thing. Almonds are packed with healthy fats to keep our brain functioning properly, protein to keep our muscles and bones strong, fiber to keep us regular and satisfied, as well as a variety of vitamins and minerals to help us maintain our overall health and a robust immune system. Avoiding almonds, or any nuts or seeds for that matter, because they're classified as a red food, would be a huge missed opportunity for the incorporation of some of these healthy and delicious powerhouse foods. Number 3, the use of unqualified coaches. Another concern with the app is the possibility of less qualified coaches giving diet advice to users. While Noom's website does state that their coaches are all put through Numaversity, whatever that means, there really is no specific mention of the coaches being required to be qualified registered dietitians or any kind of specific nutrition experts of any kind. A lot of users' reviews also mention feeling like their coach was not only personalizing any information for them, and that maybe that they were potentially even bots. So this generalized format of all people receiving feedback from an online coach who maybe doesn't seem to take a lot of time to fully understand their individual needs and or potential triggers just doesn't seem like something that I would want to put my money into. Instead, finding a registered dietitian and seeking their advice and guidance through whatever journey you are on seems like a much safer and more effective way to go about this. Lots of RDs also offer virtual counseling, especially right now. So if you are really set on doing this from home, you can at least have the guarantee that there is a qualified human on the other side of the line. Now, number 4, it doesn't flag problematic weight loss goals or disordered eating. Now, for a supposed anti-diet app, I am personally shocked that there is no screening done for actual disordered eating. There's also a real serious potential for the app to promote the underconsumption of calories and nutrients. So as an example for myself, I input my pre-pregnancy healthy weight and selected my unattainable goal weight to be 30 pounds less than that current weight. The app saw no problem with this, even telling me that this was a great goal to work towards. I also chose the cheetah as my speed for weight loss, and the app told me I would be able to meet my goal within 3 months. That would mean losing 10 pounds per month, which is an unhealthy and unrealistic feat in my books. I've even heard of other friends putting in even crazier goals, like losing 100 pounds in a few months. No dietitian or any real nutrition professional would ever give the thumbs up to that. But anyway, I want to keep things semi-realistic for you so I could create a meal plan that wasn't a total joke. And as a result of the data that I input, it generated my recommended intake of calories to be 1,200. And this was after indicating that I had an active lifestyle. This calorie budget would have been far too low to feasibly consume an adequate amount of nutrients and calories to sustain my health over time. But to put this into perspective, here is a perfect day on Noom's recommended 1,200 calorie budget. So for breakfast, I could have a small banana, half a cup of oatmeal made with water, and half a cup of low-fat yogurt. For morning snack, just water. So yeah, that would kind of suck. Lunch would be 2 carrots, half a cup of brown rice, a tablespoon of soy sauce, and a small fillet of salmon. Afternoon snack, I would get 3 stalks of celery and 3 tablespoons of hummus. And then dinner would be 1 cup of cooked whole grain pasta, 3 spears of broccoli, and a half a block of tofu. And for my evening snack, 1 small apple with a tablespoon of peanut butter. Ugh, I am just sad thinking about this. I am not sure how many people would really be able to follow such a restrictive diet for very long. I mean, I know I certainly would not be able to. I am literally just hungry looking at that menu. But then finally, my last piece of beef is the daily weigh-ins. Now, Noom encourages its users to overcome their scale anxiety and to learn to love their scale, which is highly concerning given the fact that research actually tells us to do the opposite. One literature review looking at 20 different articles found a negative relationship between frequent weigh-ins and psychological outcomes. They found that self-esteem, body evaluation, and eating behaviors were all negatively impacted by engaging in regular self-weighing. I know a lot of diets will tell you to weigh yourself quite often, so it really shouldn't be that huge of a surprise. But the reason that this is such a red flag for me is because Noom claims to offer its users the exact opposite of this, a supportive experience for healthy behavior changes. And while they do cite research of their own, it's important to note that this particular study concluded that frequent self-weighing, at the very least, seems to be a good predictor of moderate weight loss, and that more research is needed. The thing is, yes, weighing in might very well increase your chances of losing weight, but at what physical and psychological cost? I also want to remind you that if you were to actually get on the scale every morning, you would probably see some huge discrepancies that would have nothing to do with what you ate or how much you exercised. For example, in preparation for this video, this week I weighed myself on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And guess what? Between those 3 days, there was a 7-pound difference. Your weight will increase or decrease depending on hydration, salt or carb intake, hormones, exercise, your last bathroom visit, etc. So if you are seeing your numbers fluctuate every day like that while eating that depressing meal plan I just cited, how could you not feel discouraged and depressed? Now, at this point, I want to bring in my colleague, Caroline Patrick, who's an intuitive eating dietitian based out of Austin, Texas, who actually used to work for Noom 2 years ago, but of course left due to professional and philosophical differences. So thank you for joining me, Caroline.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So tell me a little bit about your role at Noom.
Yeah, so I was a health coach with Noom, and then from there are pretty much just two primary roles that you can take. You can either be a goal specialist where you work one-on-one with users, or you can be a group coach where essentially you facilitate group discussions among a bunch of different groups. So I worked as a goal specialist working just one-on-one with users for the majority of my time.
Wow. And what were some of the kind of red flags that you saw with the app while you were still on the team?
Yeah, I think there were a number. One thing that really started getting to me very quickly was the idea that it wasn't a diet, because there was very clearly a calorie restriction component. People were counting calories. Then there was kind of like the quality of calories. So calories are essentially calculated based on, you put in your height and weight. And then from there, most people are set automatically to lose 2 pounds a week. So they decrease that amount of calories from kind of your baseline, and you're left with essentially nothing. I mean, it's less than what my 45-pound dog needs in a day. And so it was really frustrating to me to see that they were just saying it wasn't a diet when they're asking people to restrict so heavily. And then from there, they have this kind of food system where they categorize foods into either green, yellow, or red based on their caloric density, with a few exceptions. So essentially, if you have broccoli or leafy greens that are going to be really high in water content, you can have a lot more volume for a lot fewer calories. On the contrary, you have nuts that are going to provide a lot more calories for a lot less volume. So that was essentially how they wanted you to eat. They wanted you to eat a lot more of those green foods and a lot fewer red foods. It was so easy for people to go over on red, obviously, because there are so many foods that are calorically dense, and not even like traditionally healthy foods like nuts and oils and things like that. And so there was a lot of food shaming even from there. So they would kind of vilify processed foods, added sugars, refined grains. These things were all really, really seen as unhealthy, and that there was a healthier choice to go for. So I think those were kinds of really big red flags that I saw pretty, superficially.
Wow. Yeah. And that's so surprising about the 2 pounds a week thing. I mean, that's a lot of weight for people to be consistently losing every single week. I mean, that's a pretty hefty goal. So I'm not surprised that the calorie reduction the deficit would have to be so great. So that's crazy. Now looking back as an intuitive eating dietitian now, what's your greatest concern with people using this app?
I think, there was no really real assessment in terms of what, if anyone had an eating disorder or for eating disorder behaviors. So I think that was a problem in and of itself, and knowing that probably the vast majority of the coaches didn't have any background in that. And on top of that, the app promotes a lot of disordered behaviors and severe calorie restriction. And so I think that is really, really problematic, because it's kind of like you have this app that's cheering you on. You have a whole support system in it that's encouraging you to continue engaging in these disordered behaviors and finding strategies to prolong those disordered behaviors. So, I've heard them say, we're not in the weight loss business, we're in the behavior change business.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, you are putting these people on really, really strict calorie control diets, and then giving them behaviors and techniques and strategies to prolong that starvation. And it's really unhealthy. So I think that is probably my biggest concern, is that it's kind of just giving a way for people to engage with it even longer.
Oh yeah, super, super problematic. And another thing that I think a lot of people want to know about is this Numaversity, or like the training that the coaches might have. Because I know a lot of people even question whether or not these coaches are real, but obviously you are real. So that's good to know. But yeah, what kind of training would all of these coaches be given?
Yeah. So I will say all the coaches are real. Although there are some like canned messages and things like that, because sometimes the caseloads get really high. So it's necessary for us to kind of have that, those kind of flat messages that we can all send. But so Numaversity is essentially a health coaching certification program. So it's recognized by the International Consortium for Health and Wellness Coaching. And I actually never went to Numaversity because it didn't align with like my dates of employment there. So I'm not sure exactly what it looks like, but from my understanding, it's just a health coaching certification. And then you had to get a certain amount of practice hours, which you would get working with the app. And then at the end of a certain amount of time and hours met, you take an exam and get certified.
So the health coaches, I mean, obviously you're a dietitian, but are all the health coaches dietitians or kind of certified and have a degree in nutrition or anything like that?
So it was kind of a vast array of people. A lot of people are actually dietitians. Some people were psychologists, some people were social workers, some people had a fitness background, or studied exercise physiology, or all these other kinds of health related fields is where everyone was coming from. But it was unclear about exactly how much nutrition knowledge people had, or awareness around what true health really looks like.
Very interesting. So that was not a requirement of the job that you had to be a dietitian necessarily.
No, and that was kind of sometimes difficult because I couldn't act as a dietitian. Like, I had restrictions put on me because I was only working in my capacity as a health coach and not a dietitian.
Very interesting. And do you have any insights on kind of the long-term weight loss success rate for people using the app?
I will say that there They have done some studies. Noom has kind of a research team, and they do actually do a lot of academic work, but they haven't produced any long-term studies. I think the longest one has been a year, and we know that that's not a long-term study. Maybe in weight loss research that's considered long, but it's really not. And so we know that people have that weight regain within 2 to 5 years. The vast majority of people do. So, it's troubling for me to see their claims that they are going to help you lose weight and keep it off for good. That's kind of like their tagline. And they have no proof of that. I think probably one problem is nobody wants to be using an app, I would assume, for years on end. So it's hard for them to continue tracking everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't seem feasible. So yeah, very interesting. Well, thank you so much, Caroline, for sharing your insights and kind of the behind the scenes in the Noom world. It's really been so fascinating for us.
I'm definitely going to be leaving some links to her website and to Instagram so that you can reach out for some one-on-one support. So what is my overall take home on Noom? Well, do not be mistaken, folks. Noom is still a diet. And if you've tried different restrictive weight loss diets in the past without achieving the results that you were looking for, this will likely not be any different. If you are truly seeking a positive behavior change for a healthier lifestyle, there are much better ways to go about it. For example, eating plenty of fruits and vegetables in your day, choosing quality protein sources, and choosing whole grain starches more often than refined. Also, if you feel that logging your meals is an effective tool for you and you don't see any real benefit to those daily readings or quizzes, there are lots of other free apps that could do the trick. And if you feel drawn to the promise of a greater attention to the psychological aspects of eating and behavior change that the Noom app always promises, I would really encourage you to reach out to a health professional like a registered dietitian who can work with you one-on-one to understand your unique emotional triggers and strategies. All in all, if following the highlighted food rules, calorie budgets, and speaking virtually to a potentially not so well qualified health coach doesn't seem like the right path for you, I would not recommend Zoom. But on that note, I would love to hear your thoughts. Has Noom worked for you, or did you find the app problematic? Are there other diets or apps that you want me to review? Definitely leave me a comment below if you liked this diet style review. Don't forget to give me the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye!